The order is already in motion before it is understood. It exists first as language, fixed and unambiguous, reduced to lines that do not invite interpretation. It passes from surface to surface, reproduced with exactness. Each copy is identical. Each carries the same authority. No emphasis is added, no doubt is removed. It does not need to persuade. It only needs to be received. Hands take it. Eyes scan it. The words are familiar in shape and tone, built from phrases used many times before. There is nothing unusual in its structure. It contains no urgency, no warning, no margin. It does not describe consequences. It does not acknowledge uncertainty. It states what must be done, and when. That is enough. The order does not arrive suddenly. It arrives on schedule. It moves along channels designed for speed and reliability. It is logged, stamped, acknowledged. Each acknowledgement confirms receipt, not agreement. Each response is brief and complete. The order is now traceable. It can be followed backward through the system, step by step, without interruption. There is no conversation attached to it. No voice is raised to clarify its meaning. No additional context is requested. The order was written to stand alone. It assumes that what is required is already known. It assumes alignment. It assumes compliance. And it receives both. The system around it reacts automatically. Timetables adjust. Resources shift. Small preparations begin without announcement. Movements occur that appear routine to anyone watching from the outside. Nothing signals deviation. Nothing suggests risk. The machinery of execution responds as it was designed to respond. The order does not ask for judgment. It removes the need for it. Those who handle it do so with practiced efficiency. They have seen orders like this before. The format is familiar. The phrasing is standard. The certainty is reassuring. It does not ask them to decide. It asks them to proceed. So they proceed. There is comfort in this process. Comfort in knowing that responsibility has already been resolved elsewhere. The order has passed through layers of authority before arriving here. That passage gives it weight. The distance it has traveled lends it credibility. By the time it reaches its final recipients, it carries the implication that all necessary thinking has already occurred. No one pauses to consider what the order does not say. No one wonders whether conditions have changed since it was written. The order exists outside of conditions. It is treated as stable, immune to circumstance. Reality is expected to conform to it, not the other way around. The system was built for this moment, built to receive direction and translate it into action without friction, built to ensure that once an order begins to move, it does not stop. There is no single moment where the decision becomes irreversible. It becomes irreversible through repetition, through acceptance, through the absence of resistance. By the time the order reaches the lowest level of execution, it no longer feels like a choice that was made. It feels like a fact that has always existed. And once a fact begins to move, nothing within the structure is designed to stand in its way. The outcome is no longer ahead of the order. It is already inside it. The environment is built to prevent hesitation. It is not shaped around individual judgment, but around continuity. Each space, each corridor, each desk and field table exists for one purpose: to keep decisions moving downward, intact, unaltered, and unchallenged. The system does not hide its nature. It is explicit. It is orderly. It is proud of its own efficiency. The chain begins above visibility. The origin of the order remains absent from the places where it is executed. No one here saw the deliberation that produced it. No one here heard the arguments that may have surrounded it, if arguments existed at all. The order arrives already cleaned of that residue. It has been processed into certainty. It is delivered as final. What follows is not discussion, but distribution. There are defined steps for how a directive becomes action, not just traditions, but procedures. A message is received, then acknowledged. It is copied, then confirmed. It is transmitted again, then reconfirmed. The act of confirmation is itself a ritual of obedience. The language does not change. The meaning is treated as singular. Each repetition reinforces the assumption that there is nothing to interpret. Even the pauses are formal. There are moments where the order waits on a signature, a stamp, a time slot in the communication schedule. These delays are not friction. They are part of the design. They create the appearance of careful handling without creating actual reconsideration. The order does not pause to be questioned. It pauses only to be made legitimate in the eyes of the structure. In this environment, authority is not performed through shouting. It is performed through calmness. Voices remain level. Expressions remain controlled. The system has trained its people to treat urgency as unprofessional. Panic is noise. Noise creates doubt. Doubt creates delay. Delay threatens the chain. So the chain discourages emotion and rewards composure, even when the content of a message demands speed. Obedience is not dramatic. It is clean. The people who move the order are not reckless. Many are meticulous. They keep records. They follow checklists. They do not improvise. They do not deviate. Their precision is part of what makes the structure powerful. It is also part of what makes it lethal when the decision at the top is flawed. The hierarchy is visible in small things. Who speaks first? Who remains silent? Where a person stands when receiving instruction? How long their gaze is allowed to remain on the paper before they fold it? The structure is reinforced by habit and posture as much as by written regulation. It turns human behavior into a predictable pattern. Predictability is valued because it can be controlled. Control is the point. When an order moves down the chain, it becomes more than a directive. It becomes a test of the system's integrity. The system does not ask whether the order is wise. It asks whether the order will be carried. Carrying it becomes proof that the chain is intact. In that sense, obedience is not just compliance. It is maintenance. It keeps the institution functioning. Questioning is treated as damage, not open rebellion, something quieter, a request for clarification, a suggestion that circumstances might not match assumptions, a note that timing seems tight or that resources are thin. These things are not forbidden outright. They simply have no place to land. There is no channel designed to receive them without slowing the machinery. The system has ways to absorb concerns without changing course. Noted. Understood. Proceed as directed. The structure does not punish doubt loudly. It neutralizes it. If someone hesitates, the response is procedural. Another confirmation request, another reminder of the timeline, another reference to the authority already embedded in the wording. The order itself becomes the answer to every question. If doubt persists, it is reframed as incompetence, not conscience, a failure to understand, a failure to keep up. The pressure is subtle and constant. Competence here means moving the order forward, so everyone becomes fluent in silence. There are opportunities to speak, but they are narrow and formal. They require phrasing that does not contradict the directive. They require tones that do not imply disagreement. They require deference, and deference is a language that cannot carry a warning without sounding like an accusation. Even when someone senses a mismatch between the order and the conditions surrounding it, the structure pushes them toward safe speech, compliance language, confirmation language, professional language, language that keeps the chain unbroken. The efficiency is real. Within minutes, logistics align. Within hours, schedules tighten. Entire groups shift without confusion because the system has practiced this for years. People know what to pack, what to leave, which route to take, how to sign for equipment, how to report readiness. The structure is so well developed that the act of obeying feels almost automatic. It reduces complexity into steps. It reduces uncertainty into routines. It turns motion into inevitability. And because it is efficient, it feels correct. Speed becomes evidence. Smoothness becomes validation. The absence of chaos is mistaken for the absence of error. The system interprets its own competence as proof that the decision it carries must also be competent. It cannot separate execution from wisdom. If the chain works, then what it carries is assumed to be worthy of being carried. The order continues downward, untouched. At each level, responsibility is redefined. Those above are responsible for deciding. Those below are responsible for performing. Between them is a narrow space where no one feels authorized to change anything, and no one is expected to. The structure has been built precisely to prevent that space from widening, because once it widens, the institution loses control over what it is commanded, so the chain remains tight. The order remains pure, the system remains calm, and the calmness becomes its own kind of threat, because it means the machinery will not stop, even if it should. The transition from instruction to action does not announce itself. There is no ceremony marking the moment when the order becomes movement. It simply happens. Preparations that were abstract become physical. Items are counted. Positions are assigned. Timings are synchronized. Each action corresponds directly to a line that was written earlier, somewhere else, by someone unseen. The execution begins quietly. The order is broken down into components, not to alter it, but to make it manageable. Each component is treated as complete in itself. No one is tasked with seeing the whole. Coordination replaces comprehension. Individuals are given responsibilities narrow enough to be fulfilled without context. This is not accidental. The system was designed to function even when no single person understands the entire operation. Precision is valued over awareness. Movements occur at prearranged intervals. Units align because alignment is expected. Equipment is prepared because it is listed. Routes are followed because they are specified. There is no deviation. Not because deviation is forbidden, but because it is unnecessary. Everything required has already been defined. To change course would require authority that no one here possesses. Communication is efficient and limited. Messages are short, standardized, and stripped of tone. Status updates confirm readiness, not conditions. Completion of each step is reported upward, reinforcing the appearance of progress. The language is uniform. In position. Prepared. Standing by. Each phrase signals obedience, not assessment. Time becomes the governing force. The schedule embedded in the order dictates behavior more strongly than the environment itself. Actions occur when the clock requires them to occur, not when circumstances suggest they should. The system trusts timing more than observation. Watches are checked more often than surroundings. Deviating from the timeline would imply doubt in the order's assumptions. No one introduces that implication. There is no hesitation visible in the process. If there is uncertainty, it remains private and irrelevant. The execution phase does not provide space for reflection. Once action begins, the structure narrows attention to immediate tasks. Hands move. Signals are given. Positions are taken. Each movement is justified by procedure, not by outcome. Coordination creates the illusion of control. Everything appears organized. The absence of confusion suggests competence. This visual order reinforces confidence, even as it obscures vulnerability. Because each element performs exactly as instructed, the system appears strong. There is no obvious failure yet, and so there is no reason, within the logic of the structure, to stop. The order does not adapt. It does not observe. It continues. Those executing it do not question the sequence, because the sequence has already been validated by authority. Their role is not to evaluate, but to align. The chain requires consistency, and consistency is achieved by removing discretion. Decisions have been reduced to execution, and execution has been reduced to repetition. Silence dominates the process, not the silence of fear, but the silence of routine. There are sounds, mechanical, procedural, but no voices raised in concern. The absence of commentary is not enforced. It is habitual. Commentary would suggest uncertainty. Uncertainty would disrupt the flow, so the flow continues. Each completed step makes reversal less likely. Each confirmation sent upward tightens the system's commitment to the path already chosen. The act of reporting success becomes a form of reinforcement. The more progress is acknowledged, the more unthinkable interruption becomes. The order advances through its phases exactly as written. Nothing is skipped. Nothing is added. The system prides itself on fidelity. Fidelity to instruction is treated as the highest form of professionalism. The idea that fidelity itself could be dangerous does not enter the process. That possibility was not included in the original language, and so the execution proceeds without question, without pause, and without deviation, carrying forward a decision that no longer belongs to anyone, but continues to act through everyone. The first signs do not announce themselves as failure. They appear as minor inconsistencies, easily absorbed by procedure. A timing confirmation arrives slightly later than expected. A position report sounds correct, but lacks the usual specificity. These deviations are noted, recorded, and filed into the margins of attention where anomalies are placed when they do not yet justify interruption. The order remains unchanged. The system is not designed to respond to ambiguity. It is designed to complete sequences. When information surfaces that does not fit the assumptions embedded in the directive, it is treated as noise rather than signal. The order does not contain instructions for reinterpretation. It contains instructions for continuation. So continuation is what follows. As the operation advances, the environment begins to assert itself in ways the order did not account for. Conditions shift subtly, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to create friction between instruction and reality. The system senses this friction but lacks the mechanisms to respond. There is no formal trigger for re-evaluation. There is only the next step. Reports move upward, but they are constrained by format. Each update must fit within predefined categories. Ready or not, complete or incomplete, on schedule or delayed. There is no space to communicate uncertainty without framing it as error, and error implies fault. Fault implies deviation. Deviation is not authorized, so language is adjusted to remain compliant. The structure continues to interpret progress as confirmation. When signals conflict, the system privileges the order over observation. The assumption is that the order represents a broader understanding than any single point of view. Local inconsistencies are expected to resolve themselves as execution continues. The idea that they might compound is not formally recognized. The machinery advances into conditions it was not designed to process. Coordination begins to strain, but it does not break. The chain holds. That endurance becomes deceptive. Because nothing collapses immediately, the system interprets resilience as success. The absence of immediate catastrophe reinforces trust in the original directive. The order persists. Attempts to reconcile reality with instruction occur quietly and informally. Small adjustments are made at the margins, not to change the order, but to survive it. These adjustments are invisible to the structure as a whole. They are treated as individual problem-solving rather than systemic warning. No one calls for reversal. To do so would require authority that does not exist at this level. It would also require admitting that the order itself is flawed. The system has no language for that admission once execution is underway. There is no protocol for stopping an order because it is no longer appropriate. There are only protocols for stopping when it has been completed. Confusion begins to accumulate. It does not arrive as panic. It arrives as delay, as misalignment, as reports that are technically correct but increasingly disconnected from reality. The system continues to translate these reports into confirmation because that is what it is trained to do. The order moves forward, now carrying consequences that were not anticipated. Each step taken under its authority deepens commitment to the path already chosen. The cost of stopping increases with every action completed. The system measures success by adherence, not outcome. As long as adherence continues, the structure believes it is functioning. The flaw is no longer theoretical. It has entered the process, embedded itself into timing, positioning, coordination. But the order does not change to accommodate this new reality. It cannot. It was written to be followed, not to listen. So the system presses on, executing with discipline and precision, even as the gap between instruction and circumstance widens, until that gap can no longer be ignored, but still cannot be addressed. The breakdown does not arrive as a single moment. It unfolds across the structure unevenly, revealing itself in fragments. A scheduled action completes, but produces no stabilizing effect. A coordinated movement succeeds in form, yet fails in function. Systems report normal operation, while their outputs no longer align with intent. The machinery continues to turn, but what it produces no longer resembles control. The order is still active. There is no command issued to stop, no override transmitted. The authority embedded in the original directive remains intact, even as its consequences expand beyond what the structure can absorb. The system has already committed its resources, its timing, its momentum. To halt now would require a decision equal in weight to the one that began the process. No such decision appears. Instead, the structure compensates. Additional effort is applied to maintain coherence. Redundancies are activated. Contingencies designed for local disruption are deployed against systemic failure. These measures were not meant for this scale, but they are all that exists. They preserve motion, not meaning. They keep things moving forward without correcting direction. Loss accumulates quietly, not as spectacle but as subtraction. Units fail to reappear in subsequent reports. Scheduled confirmations do not arrive, then are marked as delayed, then quietly removed from expectation. The system adjusts its metrics without acknowledging what those adjustments represent. Numbers are revised. Assumptions are recalculated. The order remains unchanged. Coordination begins to fracture, not through chaos, but through overextension. The system demands responses faster than they can be generated. It requires precision from elements no longer positioned to deliver it. Instructions arrive on time, but no longer correspond to the conditions they encounter. Execution becomes increasingly symbolic. Actions performed because they are required, not because they achieve effect. The structure tightens. Control mechanisms are applied more rigidly as uncertainty increases. Deviations are treated as procedural errors rather than indicators of collapse. Compliance is enforced more strictly, as if discipline alone can restore alignment. The system responds to failure by demanding better obedience. This accelerates the breakdown. As pressure increases, the margin for adjustment disappears entirely. There is no longer room for informal correction. Everything must conform exactly to instruction, even when instruction no longer maps to reality. The order, once a guide, becomes a constraint. The consequences multiply. They are no longer isolated or ambiguous. They spread across the operation, affecting timing, supply, coordination, and communication simultaneously. The structure absorbs these impacts without acknowledgement, redistributing strain rather than resolving it. Each component continues to function locally while contributing to a broader failure. There is no focal point for responsibility. The collapse does not belong to a single action or location. It is distributed, systemic, and therefore difficult to name. The system cannot point to a moment where things went wrong, because no one violated procedure. Everything occurred as instructed. The order is fulfilled in form, if not in outcome. By the time the structure recognizes that the situation cannot be stabilized, recognition itself has no practical effect. The machinery cannot reverse its own momentum. What remains is not control, but inertia. Process continuing because stopping was never designed into it. The collapse completes without drama, not as an explosion, but as exhaustion. Systems reach limits they were never meant to approach. Coordination degrades into repetition. Effort continues without expectation of success. The structure expends what remains of its capacity, attempting to satisfy an order that no longer corresponds to anything achievable. When motion finally slows, it does so unevenly. Some elements cease entirely. Others continue briefly, unaware that the system they depend on has already failed. The order persists until there is nothing left for it to act upon. And when it ends, it does not end because it was cancelled. It ends because the structure that carried it can no longer sustain itself. Afterward, there is no announcement. The structure does not mark the moment when the order becomes past tense. It simply stops generating new actions. Reports taper off. Schedules are cleared without comment. The machinery that once moved with certainty redirects its attention to other directives, other sequences, already waiting to be carried. The failure is not named. It exists in records, but only as data. Figures are adjusted. Totals are reconciled. Absences are converted into categories that can be archived. Language becomes careful and minimal. Descriptions avoid implication. What occurred is reduced to what can be documented without interpretation. The order itself is not discussed. It is neither defended nor condemned. It is treated as complete. Once an order has finished moving through the system, it loses relevance. The structure is oriented forward, not backward. Reflection offers no operational value. The system does not pause to learn. It proceeds to the next requirement. Responsibility disperses. No single position contains enough of the process to claim ownership of the outcome. Each level fulfilled its function. Each transmission occurred correctly. Each confirmation was logged. Because the order was followed exactly, There is no procedural failure to correct. The absence of error within the rules becomes proof that the rules remain sound. Silence becomes institutional, not enforced but shared. The people who participated do not speak of it because there is no framework for doing so. The event does not fit into narratives of success or improvement. It is not commemorated. It is not analyzed publicly. It is absorbed as something that happened, then placed beyond immediate concern. The structure reasserts normalcy. New orders arrive. They follow the same channels. They carry the same tone. The same mechanisms engage to move them forward. The system shows no visible scar. Its efficiency remains intact. Its confidence returns quickly, because confidence is a product of continuity. What was lost is not revisited. Loss has no procedural function once accounted for. It does not alter future directives unless it threatens capacity. When capacity is restored, attention shifts elsewhere. The structure values stability above memory. The order becomes indistinguishable from others that came before it. It exists in archives, filed correctly, referenced only when necessary to justify records. Its consequences are separated from its language. The words remain neutral. The outcome does not attach to them. Nothing within the system indicates that this order was different. That is how the structure protects itself, by treating failure as an isolated occurrence rather than a feature of its design. By ensuring that the process that produced the outcome remains unquestioned because it functioned as intended. Eventually, the conditions that allowed the order to fail are recreated, not deliberately, automatically. The same assumptions, the same faith in hierarchy, the same reliance on obedience as a substitute for judgment, the same belief that if an order moves cleanly through the system, it must be correct. Another directive is already in motion. It begins the same way, formal, precise, unquestioned. It travels the same paths. It activates the same machinery. There is no reference to what came before it, because nothing in the structure requires remembering. The system does not change. It only continues, and somewhere within it, certainty is already forming again, ready to be carried, intact, toward whatever consequence waits to receive it.